Hello and welcome to Your Choice 2024 primary election coverage on HOMTV. I'm Samantha Deal. Joining me for this candidate interview is Emily Stivers, Democratic candidate for Meridian Township Clerk. Emily, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure, Samantha. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Before we get started, please take this time to introduce yourself to the viewing audience.
Sure. Well, my name is Emily Stivers, and I'm running to be the next Meridian Township Clerk because I care deeply about election integrity and continuing and building upon the hard work that our current clerk, Deb Guthrie, has put into place. With her leadership and our amazing clerk's office staff, Meridian Township is already tops in the state for voter participation. I think we can do even better. My experience and background are ideally matched for the position of clerk. I'm a former Ingham County Commissioner. I was elected twice and served 2 full terms. And I also have served on the Meridian Township Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. I have 22 years of experience managing offices, programs, personnel, and policies. I'm also a mom of 2, with another one on the way in September. And this background informs my perspective on and my investment and commitment to the community of Meridian Township. I hope to earn the votes of the community on August 6th.
Thank you. Each Meridian Township Clerk candidate will be asked a standard list of 10 questions, and we'll get started with question number 1. Please explain how your education and professional background make you an ideal candidate for Meridian Township Clerk.
Well, let's start with education. I graduated Phi Beta Kappa with honors from Michigan State University's James Madison College. I also hold a master's in public policy from the University of Michigan, but go green. And my coursework has focused on public budgeting, values and ethics, management, statistics, and cost-benefit analysis. More importantly, I have had a 22-year professional career in management and communications. I've had invaluable and informative professional and personal experiences that uniquely prepare me for the role of clerk. I've lived in different cities and even abroad. I've studied different governments. I've made mistakes and I've learned from them. And I've been trained specifically in crisis communications. I have a deep, experience-based knowledge of how local government operates, not just here in Meridian Township, but in the larger county and with the neighboring municipalities as well. I was elected twice and served 2 terms as county commissioner for the northern half of Meridian Township, mostly Hazlitt. And while on the county board, I served as chair of the County Services Committee during the pandemic. I helped disperse our nearly $70 million in American Rescue Plan funds more efficiently, effectively, and equitably than any other county in the state of Michigan. I introduced the resolution for raising the county's minimum wage and was trusted by my peers to serve as caucus treasurer and chair of the subcommittee on ethics. I was also a leader on our community mental health board and our Parks and Recreation Commission. As I mentioned before I was elected commissioner, I served Meridian Township on the zoning board and the planning commission. I have a deep knowledge of our zoning ordinances and the challenges we face with our downtown Hazlitt and Okemos developments. I'm also a mom. My 2 boys are in our public schools in Hazlitt. My baby's due in late September. It's a girl. And being a mother is a major strength that I bring both to this race and to the role of clerk. It makes me think differently about the world that I want to help build and the legacy and long-term consequences of the policies we enact today. I believe all our kids and grandkids deserve the right to make their own decisions about their bodies, to feel safe in gun-free schools, and when they're old enough to have easy, secure access to voter information and the ballot. But ultimately for this role, experience is everything. We need a seasoned and fire-tested clerk for the challenges our community will face in the years to come, challenges to our election integrity, problems with voting. And because of my extensive experience, I am ready on day 1 to fulfill all the responsibilities of the role of clerk, including retaining our amazing staff, defending and expanding election integrity, making significant contributions to the Board of Trustees, and further expanding voter participation.
Thank you. What are the essential functions of the clerk's office, and specifically the responsibilities of the township clerk? Please address any improvements you would like to make.
Well, the most important and visible role of the township clerk is everything elections related. So making sure the township residents know when, where, and how to vote, increasing voter participation, while also ensuring that our elections remain free, fair, and secure. But there's so much more to the job even than that huge amount of work with elections. The clerk is an office manager who oversees critical systems and programs, an extremely qualified and capable staff, not to mention an extensive network of volunteers. She must retain, train, and advance these workers who directly oversee and constantly improve our electronic voter database, update signatures, addresses, and other critical voter information, maintain the equipment that we need to have secure for voting, and so much more. That's why I believe it's critical to have a clerk with management experience. The clerk is also secretary to the Board of Trustees. That means preparing all the agendas, taking notes and minutes during the meetings, making sure everyone on the board is prepared for every meeting, making sure the public is informed of what's happening in every meeting. This requires impeccable attention to detail. And the clerk is also a voting member of the Board of Trustees, so she must have extensive knowledge of how our local government works, including zoning ordinances, budget, and civic engineering and planning. Finally, the clerk must constantly educate her on the near constant updates to our election laws. Election law is extraordinarily complicated. There are so many little nuances that can trip you up. So one of the first thing that I will do on day one as clerk will be apply to the 3-year clerk certification program through the State Board of Elections and joining the Capital Area Municipal Clerks Association for additional training opportunities. These programs are only available after you've been elected or appointed as clerk, so it's important to sign up on day one and get started with that critical training. I'm also starting early by shadowing East Lansing clerk Marie Wicks, who's my mentor and dear friend, and also one of the most qualified and respected clerks in the state. She's the one they call when they need to train new clerks, staff, volunteers, all the way up to the UP. So I'm also deep diving into issues with her in our regular meetings and with my friend, Clerk Guthrie, whenever we meet for coffee. As I said, election law is extremely complex and detailed, and I will be ready on day one for all the responsibilities of the clerk's office, including the office management, elections, and education components.
You mentioned election law, which leads us to our next question. In 2022, Proposal 2 was passed by Michigan voters. This proposal brought numerous changes to elections in Michigan and the ways people can vote. How familiar are you with these changes in election law, and how do you plan to ensure Meridian Township is in compliance with these new laws?
I'm extremely familiar with these laws. I helped gather signatures for voters, not politicians, and I'm so proud that the state of Michigan passed this comprehensive overhaul and ease of access set of policies for our state. It reflects our values in Michigan, that we really care about everyone's ability to vote securely and fairly. So, among other things, Prop 2 enabled no reason absentee voting, early voting, and same-day voter registration. There's a lot of other things, but we don't have all day. Under Clerk Guthrie's leadership and the efforts of her staff, Meridian Township has implemented these laws fairly well. And we already have among the highest voter participation rates in the state. And according to the Michigan Secretary of State, the state also had the highest youth voter turnout in the country. That's reflective of the work that we've done for our MSU students and on campus. I think we can do even better. The groundwork's in place, so next we need to expand our communication efforts, branch out with awareness-raising campaigns on new social media and digital platforms, continue to simplify the language around and the process for how we vote, and just get the word out about why it's important and how to get it done. One project I am particularly excited about that Clerk Guthrie has already started is establishing satellite voter locations. These would be places where all the township ballots would be securely available, and so that if you don't know where you're supposed to go to vote, if you for some reason can't get to your polling location, or if you're not comfortable there, like maybe it's a religious facility that you feel strongly that you don't want to set foot in, you can go to the satellite voting facility, and the staff there will help you find the correct ballot and make sure you get it done. We also face an ongoing challenge with the MSU students who live in Meridian Township. They spend most of their time on campus, so they're constantly exposed to the signage there for where do you vote, come to campus. What we had in the last election was way too many students showing up to vote on campus, only to find that because their residence is in Meridian Township, they needed to go somewhere else. And too many of them didn't bother. They just went home at that point and didn't vote. So there's a huge gap to fill. And so working with East Lansing Clerk Marie Wicks and with the plans of our current clerk, Deb Guthrie, I would work really hard through official and unofficial social media channels to make sure the word gets out to every MSU student who lives in Meridian Township that they vote here, and exactly what their options are for same-day voter registration, for mail-in ballots, and so forth. There is so much more we can do to remove barriers to voting and expand participation. I could really go on for hours.
Can you share a personal story or experience that highlights your commitment to public service?
This is the toughest question because over a 22-year career, it's hard to pick just one instance. I have been committed to public service literally my entire life. The first instance that comes to mind was when I was 16 years old in high school. I competed in forensics, which is not science, it's competitive public speaking and performance. And I chose to perform a poem by Mitch Albom called The Voice. And it was all about voter participation and the importance of expressing and how one voice can make a difference. It's an extremely powerful and moving poem. I recommend everyone to Google it. And it was really important to me, of all the poetry in the world that I could have chosen to perform, that I communicate that message of the importance of voting, even when I was too young to vote myself. Another story I'd like to share just briefly is from the Great Recession around 2006. I was a full-time caregiver for my father, who was waiting for and eventually received a heart transplant. And I was in Metro Detroit, and I saw how families in my community and in the city of Detroit were struggling and losing their homes due to predatory lending practices. I knew I had to do something about it, and because I wasn't working as a caregiver, my dad didn't need 24/7 care, it was something I could do from home. So I started a credit counseling service to help subprime mortgage recipients understand how credit scores work, which is so complicated, and eventually keep their homes. I helped hundreds of families keep their homes and learned how to run a small business in the process.
How would you prioritize the use of the Township General Fund? When thinking about adopting future budgets, what do you hope to see incorporated?
Well, my stance on the general fund is generally one of fiscal responsibility and fiscal prudence. I served on the Ingham County Budget Committee, Finance Committee for 2 years, so I'm no stranger to the challenges of our local governments when they face budgeting and so many different priorities pulling the funding in so many different directions. I know that you absolutely have to have a pretty sizable rainy day fund, emergency contingency fund, because you never know when you might be facing the next natural disaster or pandemic or economic crisis, and your community will need that money desperately in those instances. But that said, Meridian Township is flourishing. We have a budget surplus, and I'd like to see us take just a little more risk to help the least advantaged people in our community. We have a crisis of affordable housing with an extremely limited number of rent-controlled units. I think I heard at a recent township board meeting that there were only 49 non-senior rent-controlled low-income apartments in the entire township, 49. So there's also a huge shortage of middle-class homes. We have these big developments coming in with these huge houses starting in the 450s tiny little lots because that's how the developer is going to make the most money. They're not really interested in the needs of our community and what we actually want to see here. So I think we need to seek out and provide incentives to increase the township's stock of affordable housing, including rent-controlled apartments and homes in the $150,000 to $300,000 range. And I think we need much better quality affordable housing for our low-income and senior residents. I don't want to see downtown Okemos and Hazlitt developments featuring luxury condos and apartments. That's not what we need in Meridian Township. I want medium to high density, affordable and middle class units. I want a better option than Grange Acres for our low and controlled income seniors. These apartments in Grange Acres have no insulation. They have no padding under the carpets. They have moldy ductwork. And the restrictions on soliciting are so strict that many of our most vulnerable seniors in that community are completely isolated and terribly lonely. I think that we can have a better option for them. And I think if the township has to sweeten the pot a little bit for a developer using the general fund or working it into the budget somehow to attract developers to that cause, I think that that's potentially the best possible use of that funding.
And just so you're aware, we're at the halfway point of our interview. We have about 5 questions remaining, which leads me to my next one. What steps do you think the township should take to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workforce to effectively represent the diverse makeup of the community?
So I know the township is already working on some fairly robust, best practice-based internal policies, but for me, it's also critically important to have representation and perspective in the township board and in our staff. All you have to do is look at a photo of the board and the staff that make up the township government, and you can see we're not doing enough to improve diversity. We have a long way to go. I'm someone who identifies as pansexual, so I bring a small element of diversity to the board, as would our LGBTQ trustee candidate, Nick Lentz, who's a friend of mine. But still, our local government is going to be much whiter than the population we represent. I've been in charge of recruiting, hiring, and supporting employees in several roles over my 22-year career. And as clerk, I would start with volunteer outreach. The clerk needs a lot of volunteers. And I think targeting minority communities and especially going into schools, the Okemos schools have a huge diversity of South Asian heritage students. And I think that those folks are not represented in our government currently. So getting them at a young age excited about elections, excited about government and the potential is the first step towards building long-term diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think there's another dimension of DEI that's too often neglected, and that is people with disabilities. I think under the management of our township manager, Frank Walsh, people with disabilities were made to feel they couldn't ask for reasonable accommodations. And there was a stigma and even retaliation for people using their paid time off. As clerk, I want to make sure the new township manager prioritizes work-life balance for our workers and fair HR policies for all employees. Having a healthy, productive, and balanced workplace is essential for retaining all high-quality employees, and especially people of all races, genders, ability levels, and other backgrounds.
How do you plan to foster positive employee relations? Can you please provide a specific example?
Yeah, I think employee morale in the township hit an all-time low with the Frank Walsh scandal. This man was in charge for far too long. He took many responsibilities that shouldn't have been his, and there were not enough people paying attention to the toxic work environment that he fostered. I think people in leadership positions kind of turned the other way and chose not to see some of what was going on because he was so good at his job. And I think it cost us some really good workers over the years and possibly damaged some workers who had to serve under him. So I think it's critical that we seek input from the township's employees in the search for the new township manager. And ultimately, we need to choose someone who values diversity and work-life balance. someone who isn't going to belittle and bully employees for taking their hard-earned paid time off. And I think we need to heal from this scandal by providing more information and transparency about exactly what happened and holding some of our leaders accountable. That's why I call on the Township Board of Trustees to immediately release the 12-point recommendation that came from the private investigator who was hired in the Frank Walsh scandal. I think we can redact any identifying information to protect the whistleblowers who were involved. Our workers cannot fully heal when there are still so many residents who don't know the full story and continue to defend Frank Walsh, believing he was a nice guy, he was good at his job, and he showed up to events with a smile. And moving forward, we need better engagement and communication between township leadership and employees, regular anonymous surveys, access to counseling and grievance services, and just more empathy and humanity in the way we treat each other in the workplace. Flexibility for people's real lives, I think, is critical to creating the kind of positive employee relationships that our community deserves.
How will you utilize transparency to create an effective and trusting community for both Meridian Township employees and the residents of the township?
Well, again, I call on the township to release the 12-point memo provided by the independent investigators in the Frank Walsh scandal. There's a concern for protecting whistleblowers, but I believe their identifying information can be easily redacted. We all deserve to know what really happened. I think there's a problem in politics in general where when a mistake is made, something bad took place, you want to cover it up because it reflects poorly on you, your reelection potential, the government as a whole. People might start saying, Meridian Township isn't such a great place to live because this happened. But I think there's a time to do what's right, even if it's not going to earn you any brownie points with the community, even if you might not get reelected. I'm a big fan of elected leaders who can admit when they've made a mistake, learn from it, grow from it, and be honest and transparent about it. We must have transparency. We must have accountability. Without these, there is no trust between the community, our workers, and our leadership. The sooner this board tells the truth and releases that report, the sooner we can all heal and move on.
What do you consider to be the top 2 challenges facing Meridian Township?
Well, I'd say the first is that transparency issue that I've talked about, so I won't belabor that. But the second would be the downtown Okemos and Hazlitt development projects. Hazlitt is coming along, but Okemos was started a lot earlier and it's a lot further behind. My understanding is, in addition to the pandemic, which just shut everything down, made the costs of the project skyrocket. We lost one of the big investors, no fault of the township. There's another issue that's holding things up, and it has to do with burying the power lines in downtown Okemos. It's a huge expense, and if you've ever driven down Okemos Road around Hamilton, where that kind of raised downtown area is, you can see that the telephone poles are really close to the road. If we want a wider road with bike lanes, with sidewalks, walkability, maybe restaurants with outdoor seating, the kind of downtown we all would just love to be able to visit, we got to bury those power lines. But it's not cheap. It's a huge, huge bill. And I feel that leaders in the township do not want to put up the money for that particular part of the project. They feel that the developer should. But the truth is, in communities that have faced similar challenges across the state, it's usually the municipal government that puts up that money. This is a really hard decision, and I do not support raising taxes to cover the additional cost. But I think over the next year or so, we need to work it into the budget, and we need to just kind of bite the bullet and suck it up and take on that cost of burying the power lines in order to bring in the kind of developers and the kind of development projects that we all so desperately want to see in Okemos. So I think that that's important because we're losing money now. We're losing money in tax revenue. The longer that area is just flattened and nothing is happening there, that's years of tax revenue that we're not collecting. We're not recouping the costs for what we've already done, cleaning up the brownfields and raising the buildings that had been there. So at some point you have to throw some good money after bad and get it done. And eventually, it'll take a little longer than we wanted, but we will recoup those costs through the tax revenue of the businesses and housing developments that go in there. I think it's going to take a skillful manager and a knowledgeable budget-oriented board to figure out where that money should come from. As I said, I don't support any increase in taxes to offset the cost. We need to find the money elsewhere, and we have an idea. One possibility is a new tax increment financing, or TIF, being offered by MISTA. That's the Michigan State Housing and Development Authority. This is brand new, okay? I'm very excited about it. It has very few restrictions other than encouraging affordable housing and providing grants for brownfield improvement and affordable housing going up there, which is exactly what we have in downtown Okemos. The township could feed two birds with one seed, solve our housing crisis, and advance our downtown projects with this TIF. But at a recent board meeting, the members of the board seemed hesitant to pursue the possibility because this program is brand new, no one has done it before, and there aren't any models for us to emulate. We can't look over at Grand Ledge or Grand Rapids and say, well, here's what they did, let's copy. We would actually have to take a risk, be a leader, create the model for those other communities to emulate. And that's what I would like to see happen. I'm committed to the goal of advancing these projects should I be elected clerk.
All right, and on to our final question. What goals would you like to see the township accomplish in the next 5 years?
Oh, we can do so much in 5 years, and I'm really excited about the possibilities. I think setting new records every election for voter participation and turnout, including in the 2026 midterms. Midterms, of course, are when voter turnout tends to be a lot lower because there's no presidential race, and also in the 2028 general election. We must continue to be a community that sets an example for the state and the nation in voter engagement and turnout. I'd also like to see the downtown Okemos and Hazlitt projects both completed within 5 years. I think that's a reasonable timetable, especially considering the time that's already been spent. However, we should not compromise on our township values of walkability, affordability, green spaces, and public amenities in that process. Other than that, greater transparency, more affordable housing, continuing to expand on our amazing parks and trails, working closely with Ingham County, their Trails and Parks millage. There's really no limit to what we can accomplish in 5 years, and I would be honored and excited to be a part of it.
With the last few minutes remaining, we would like to provide you an opportunity to make a closing statement for the viewing audience. This November election will likely face many challenges if the last presidential election is any indication. And those challenges will continue well into the new year. In a worst-case scenario, we could be facing a local January 6th style uprising. These are serious times, and we need a capable, qualified public servant managing the Meridian Township Clerk's office, staff, and duties from day one. With 22 years of professional management experience, including 6 years serving in local government, I have the foundation necessary to improve and defend our election integrity, manage the clerk's office and staff, and expand our voter registration, access, and participation, even in difficult times to come. I'm Emily Stivers, and I would be honored and humbled to receive your vote on August 6th in the Democratic primary. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching this candidate interview with Emily Stivers, Democratic candidate for Meridian Township Clerk. I'm Samantha Deal. Thanks for watching.